The last mission was Wiener Neustadt in Austria. It was an aircraft plant. I believe it was a fighter plant that we wanted to knock out. I don't know how many planes was that day. We never know. The group comes up, we form in the air, and they go on over that target. We first went across the Adriatic Sea. That's how we did it. And we first approached the target. We had a lot of anti-aircraft fire below us. The night before, they had changed the right, if B-24 has 4 engines, and the right engine on the outer side was changed the night before, but they never had time to check it out. And what happened was we lost the oil pressure in that engine about 40, 50 miles from the target. And when you do that, you have to feather the engine. And feather the engine means you turn the prop sideways. If you didn't, it'd shake the wing off. It'd shake your whole wing off. You turn it, and the wind goes by it. That's what you call feather one. And they feathered that engine. But the bad part was we had to drop out of formation. We couldn't keep up with the rest of them. And when we dropped out, the fighters was all over like a bunch of flies out there. And they really was banging us up. My right wing gunner fell to the floor, and I saw him fall, and I grabbed his gun. What happened was he had his foot blown off right above the ankle. One bullet had done that. And I never will forget the look on his face. I mean, how he said, "Please help me," and I couldn't help him because I had to fire that gun. Then the left waist gunner went down. He never made a sound. He just dropped to the floor. Then the tail gunner was killed in his turret back there. And here's the bad part. My flight engineer was coming across the flight deck. We only had 3 engines now. And the fighters were then, they knocked out another engine on the same side. We only had 2 engines on the left side. And the flight engineer was coming back trying to help this boy with his foot blowed off. I didn't know this about 40 years later when my flight engineer and my radio operator found me in Florida. They hunted me up and found it, and we got together and we told the story about it. We got together and we all put whatever happened together, and that's how we found out. He said that I was standing by the window with my gun, and there was an ME-110 out on the left side and fired a rocket, and the rocket came through the side of the plane. The ball turret gunner stood up just at that moment. And he said if he hadn't stood up, I was in direct line of that rocket. The rocket hit the ball turret and blew him all to pieces. It blew me out through the side of the plane. I had my shoes on. And it set the plane on fire. It was one huge ball of fire. And I got in the air and I held out my arms. I was tumbling over like a tumbleweed. And I held out my arms and stabilized myself. I pulled my ripcord. That's when you get upset, when your ripcord don't open your parachute, and it did not open mine. Shrapnel had cut it in two. I had to take my hands and literally tear my parachute open and get it out to save my life. And it opened. I got it open. Then, as I was coming down, a lot of times the enemy fighters would find aircraft man in the air in the parachute, and they would cut him to pieces with the machine guns. And this ME-109 came straight at me, and I just said to myself, "Oh, Lord, not now." And he got real close to me. I could see him just like I'm looking at you. And he waved at me like that. Then he wobbled his wings like that. What he was telling me, he was saluting me and telling me, "I'll let you live." He could have killed me. I couldn't have stopped him. Then I hit the ground, and I hit pretty hard. I knocked myself out. Came to. I throwed my parachute in. There was a whale right there. The only house I could see down there was one house in the Alps mountains. I landed right in that yard of that house. And there was a whale there, and I throwed my parachute in that whale.
How high up were you when you got blown out of the plane?
18,000 feet. I couldn't comprehend that being blown through the side of the plane or tumbling in the air. After I found out my chute wouldn't open, I tore it open. At that point, that's when I began to realize what was going on, where I was and everything in the air.
Had you been injured when you got blown out of the plane?
Oh, yeah, I had shrapnel pieces, little pieces all over me. Every man in the back of my plane was killed except me. 6 men was killed 5 men was killed and 6 survived. We had 11 men that day. And I was always known as the 11th man, by the way. I saw 2 chutes besides my own come out. I couldn't see. I know there was others, but I didn't know. I couldn't see them. All I could see was a burning plane and 2 chutes besides my own. I started across the yard to get to the woods just to try to hide, to get whatever. I got about halfway across the yard, and there was a young girl, a little girl. She must have been maybe 8 or 10 years old. There was a house. She came out of that house and came straight to me, never said a word, and got me by the hand and led me to the door of that house. There was 2 young ladies there. They never said a word. They opened the door and carried me into the room and laid me down on the bed. I needed a friend by that time. I needed any kind of a friend, and that's what happened. I was in that house on that bed. It was about 30 minutes, if that long. The door opened again, and about 25 men. Some was dressed in uniform, some in civilian clothes. They looked like they all had rifles, and if you've ever looked down the end of a rifle, on the wrong end of it looks like about that big around. And I had them pointed at my head. They made me get up. And I was covered with body parts and blood. I was bleeding too. And this boy that was blowed the tail of a ball-tip gunner, I had parts of his body all over me. And they got up and they carried me out in the yard. And in the yard, there was a 2-wheel wagon. It was a mule or a horse. I don't remember which it was now. But on that wagon, there was something else. There was an old-fashioned coffin in the wagon with no lid on it. They put me behind that wagon, and we started walking. What would you think if you was me? That coffin was meant for me. We started walking, and we walked for, maybe over an hour down through the mountain trails. But here's a funny thing. At no time did anybody ever search me for a weapon. I had a 45 on my shoulder and a 45 on my hip. And we started out, and there was an old branch of water, and as we started across that branch of water, I deliberately fell in that water and took those 2 45s and dropped them in the water. I guess they're still there today. But that's why I got rid of those guns, because if they catch you with a gun, you'd get shot, period. That's war. As we was coming out the mountain, after we crossed that branch, we stopped again, and the trailer with the coffin on it went down into the woods, and it came back, but it had a body in it then. It was the body of the man that had his foot blown off. How he got out of that plane, I don't know. But what happened to him as he come down, his chute hung in a tree, and he bled to death. That's how he died. That was my right waist gunner. But they carried me on down and to an alpine village, a beautiful village up in the Alps mountains. And I hadn't had any water for hours since early that morning. This was on up in the afternoon. And they set me down on a wall. And they asked me, did I need anything? And I told them I needed some water. And the word, what they said was Trinkwasser. The word in German is Trinkwasser. And drinking water and Trinkwasser sound a whole lot alike. And I knew what they were talking about. I told them I needed some water. They brought me gallons of water. I could have took a bath in it, just so much of it came. And I had plenty of water. Then they carried me on, from that point, they carried me on down and put me in a big barn, a long hallway. There was a door there, and inside of that door there was sawhorses with some wooden planks on it. And at the end of that hallway there was a window with iron bars on it. And that was to be my cell. Apparently it was getting dark then. It would be my cell for that night. But there was one man. A whole village was around that door looking at the stranger, I mean, I was an oddity to him. But this one man spoke perfect English. And he started asking me when was the last time I had eaten. I said about 2 o'clock that morning. And he said something in German, I assumed. And they brought me all kinds of food. I could have had enough food for a week. Then they brought me blankets, feather beds, pillows, everything. Lay on them a wooden bed. What had happened was he said something else, and they all left. But then he asked me this, and they told me this, or asked me. in English. He said, when you go back to America, tell the American people how the Austrians treated you. That's the exact words that man told me. Then I knew where I was and what had happened. I was with the underground and didn't know it. If I had known I was with the underground, I would have given my 2 guns to them, but I didn't know it. The whole city was underground, I do believe, but because there must have been 50 people around who were crowded around that door. They were with the underground. There's no doubt about it in my mind about that. They treated me just like I just can't describe it, and I can't thank them enough.
They were helping you, and they still had to turn you over to the Germans, but they were there to help you as much as they could.
As much as they could, yes, because they were, the Germans are there also, when you don't cooperate with the enemy and get caught, you get troubles too. Next morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, there was another guard come. He couldn't speak English, carried me up to their house, and myself, this guard, and 2 young women were sitting down at the table. They was giving me breakfast. I had eggs and I don't know what kind of meat, ham, I think, or bacon, whatever it was. It was good. I was still hungry. We started out walking, and he walked about 2 blocks in front of me down there, and them 2 girls was with him. He was flirting with the girls, and they were flirting with him, is what it was. I could have easily escaped, but we were cautioned. Be darn sure you knew where you were going before you escaped. Because if you were caught, they would shoot you right then and there, right where you caught you. And we ended up at the train station down there, and that's where I met the rest of the crew that survived. They were in a train, and they put me in the same compartment with them. 2 of them had bandages from their neck all the way up, bandaged. They were burnt so bad. My radio operator was about all I could see. It was just 2 little holes for his eyes and a little hole for his mouth, that's all. His name was Ed Froelich. He saved my life later on. Took me to the Frankfurt. And there they put me in a cell. And there was another man in that cell. He had on an American outfit. And he started asking me questions, peculiar questions, about my group and all that stuff. And I told him, I said, you need to keep quiet because this cell may be bugged. And the reason he gave himself away, he had on a spotless American uniform. Didn't have no dirt on me. I was covered with blood and everything else, 5 minutes later, they come and got him. I was right. That cell has bugged. He didn't get no information out of me. Then, later, they carried me in there, and that's where they told me they was going to shoot me as a spy because I was a cameraman. Now, how they found out I was a cameraman, I don't know. They have ways of doing these things. That was their method of trying to get information out of it. It scared me into the point to get information out of me. They has gone as far as taking German soldiers, putting American uniforms on and putting them outside and actually doing a fake firing squad to make you think that you was going to be the next one out there. So even to that extent they went. But you could see through all their little traps, and I did. And the old saying, spill your guts is what they wanted you to do, and I didn't. They didn't shoot me, I wouldn't be here. But then they put me on a train, and I went from there to Stalag Luft IV, which is on the Baltic Sea. That was the worst prison camp in Germany. It had 10,000 American airmen in it, and they hated the airmen. That's why it was so bad, and we were treated pretty bad. We had 4 compounds, A, B, C, and D, and I was in compound A, barracks number 2. Boredom was one of the worst things. They didn't try to make us work or anything because we was all non-commissioned officers. I was staff sergeant. I walked around the compound, and I was counting the post, to keep from going nuts. Then I started counting the barbs on the barbed wire. We had one man, to give you some idea. We had one man, we had a what we call a dead man rail between here and the fence. And you didn't cross that rail. If you did, they could shoot you. And this boy, he did. He crossed it. We couldn't go after him because we could put ourselves in the same position he was in. We hollered for him to come back. Even the German guards hollered for him to come back. I do think you can say that. And he turned around and he looked at us and said, I'm going home to see my mama. He had went over to the deep end. He had flipped. And they cut him to pieces on the fence. He went to climb the fence and they just cut him to pieces. Had a bunk bed, had a little burn-out bag and a little straw in it. In a 12 by 14 foot room, there was 34 men in that room. It didn't have 34 beds, so some of them had to sleep on the floor. It was better if you could get somebody to move over on the floor instead of sleeping on those bunks. It was that bad. We managed. We had one little stove in there to keep 20 and 30 degrees below zero outside. One little stove in there to keep it warm. Wood stove.
And what about food?
Mostly boiled potatoes. Boiled potatoes. I can't eat a boiled potato to this day. Sometimes they would have meat in the potatoes. Apparently, they didn't bother to skin it, the animal that was dead, because we'd find hair all in the meat too, in the stuff. You had to pick the hair out before you could eat it. I've had people say, "Oh, you won't eat that kind of." Yes, you will. When you're hungry, you'll eat it.
What about tunnels? Did anybody try to dig tunnels or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we had tunnels. They would let you get the tunnel dug to the outside fence, and then they cave them in on you. They knew that we were digging them. I don't know of anyone in my camp that ever escaped from that camp. I went in there, let me think, it was in June, I believe it was. Yeah, it was in June that it ended up in that camp. I stayed in that camp till February the 5th, or 6th, I'm sorry, February the 6th of 1945. The Russian army was 40 miles from that camp at that date. You could hear the guns, remember, they were that close. The Germans decided that apparently that they didn't want 10,000 Americans turned back loose, so they opened the gates, and that's what started the death march. 10,000 of us walked out that gate that day. We had no idea what was going to happen. We had no idea where we were going or anything like that. We would walk from daylight to dark every day. And the bad part about it was that it was the food. They didn't give us any food, and they didn't give us any water. I'm going to have to tell you as it happened now. The water in the ditches was there. It was snow water, most of it. I told you, below zero weather. And that was our drinking water. We had to drink the water that 10,000 Americans use as a latrine. We had no choice. You can live without food, you can't live without water. We found that out the hard way. We walked from daylight to dark. The first night we went out, we had one blanket and one overcoat. That's all we had. And it was snowing. Oh boy, dude, was it? You think you had snow around here, you ought to see that snow. Ooh, over 2 foot deep. And we had to sleep out there in that snow. And what we did, we joined what we call combine. We'd get 3 or 4 fellas together and combine bunch. And then we would pool our survival stuff. And that's how we managed to survive to some degree. Next morning, you can see just mounds of snow out there like that, all over the place. Thousands of us out there like that. They'd get us up, and we'd keep going again, and day after day, 7 days a week. The only day we did not march was the day President Roosevelt died. I don't know why they didn't, but we didn't. They told us that he died that day. We did not know where we were going. That was the bad part. We didn't know what was going to happen. The SS troop was with us. That's the Hitler's Youth, and they were worse than any of them, and they would jab you with bayonets. We had one man that had 69 bayonet wounds in him, and he lived. Had 60 mines where they jabbed him with it, 69 of them. If you passed out on the trail from dysentery and diarrhea, which we all had from the water and stuff we had to drink, they would drag you off to the side of the road, and you'd hear a gunshot, one gunshot, and that was it. They had some Russian prisoners with us that they would dig a little hole, throw your body in it, and cover it up, and go on. Day after day, all day, you'd hear your gunshots, on and on. The food on the death march, they didn't give us anything. Once in a while, they would give us some boiled potatoes, maybe. But what we did, we begged, borrowed, and steal. That's how we survived. I've had people ask me, "What did you eat?" I said, "You really want to know?" "Yeah." I said, "Rats, big rats would get in the fields, in the barns, and manure piles, and we'd get worms, and we had the manure piles. Bigger worms, red worms you go fishing with. Well, you can also eat them. We couldn't cook them. They wouldn't let us stop long enough to cook, so we had to eat everything raw, most of it raw. So once in a while, we were able to cook, warm it up. We couldn't even cook it. I'm 100% 100% service-connected disabled right now from the VA. My feet froze twice. A lot of them, they out in the field, or even in the barn, you wake up and try to wake up your buddy, and he'd be froze stiff. Because he went to sleep, he froze. That kind of weather, if you couldn't keep him warm, he would freeze. We had a lot of them freeze to death. And my feet froze dry. I suffer from them even today, at night, particularly when I try to sleep.
About how many guards would there have been, for a group of men?
We don't know. They would just mingle all over the place. You had no idea.
And so did anybody ever try to escape?
Yes, ma'am. They tried to escape. They caught him. They shot him. I've seen it happen. We were strafed twice by our own planes. The British strafed us once. They killed quite a few people. And the Americans strafed us. They thought we were German, columns. And we were strafed by both the British and the American people. I passed out on the march, and normally they would drag you to the side of the road, and you'd hear a gunshot. But Ed Froelich was my radio operator, and he was sort of a lot bigger than I was. And he carried me over his shoulder for 3 days to save my life. He pushed food down my throat, what little he could get. He pushed it down with his finger, make me eat it. He saved my life. Basically, we call it dragging along. If I put it very bluntly, you're dragging your butt along the road, Some of your buddies will grab you hold of you and try to... we looked out for each other best we could. Sometimes we couldn't, but most of the times we managed to save each other. That march lasted for 86 days. We walked 886 miles. The group I was with marched that far. I got liberated about 2 miles from Moosburg. There was a camp there, and we thought they was going to put us in that camp. But that camp was built with 30,000 prisoners, and on that date there was 130,000. All different denominations of people was in there, prisoners. But I found out a couple of months ago from a government source where they were taking us. They were taking us to Dachau. Do you know where Dachau is? The gas chambers, that's where we were going. We were 3 days away from Dachau when we got liberated. 3 more days, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. Well, we was in this farmyard. We could hear the guns all over the place. And we thought it was strange, because normally at daylight, they'd hit the road again, but they didn't this particular day. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning, a whole column of tanks. Now, I don't remember if they were American or British, but I think they were a little bit mix of both. They come rolling up, and I never was so glad to see an Englishman in my life. I could hug his neck. They was throwing us what little food they could spare, and that's what it was like.
Did the Germans flee at this point?
Oh, yeah, they were ready to surrender. Yeah, they was all just, I remember how I treated you? I treated you good. Yeah, you did. Yes, sir, you did. Big Stoop. You ever heard the name Big Stoop? He was a German guard. He was so big, his hands was twice as big as mine. And we called Big Stoop. He was so big he had to duck to get in the door. And he'd stoop down, He was really mean to you. He busted my ears. That's why I have to have hearing aids today, and it's hard for me to hear you sometimes. He beat me up in the prison camp before the march. He come in, and I had drawn a map on the bottom. I was good at drawing on account I was in the weather, to keep the fact where the front lines were. And he come in and turned that table upside down. That's where I drew the map on the bottom of the table. And he knew exactly where it was, and he reached and got me. He knew who did it. And he beat me. I thought he was going to kill me. He busted both my head me on the floor, and he was stomping me. He was taking me, kicking me. I couldn't do nothing. And but I survived.
Was that common in the camp for people to get beaten?
Oh, yeah, with him.
Was that the only time that he beat you?
It's the only time he hit me. If I could have killed him, I'd have killed him in a second. The last time I saw Big Stoop was the day we got liberated. We had some Russian prisoners with us, like I told you. And Germans were even worse to them than they were to us. They had caught Big Stoop, tied him behind a truck by his feet, and was dragging him down the road, but they had cut his head off while he was still alive and put it in a basket. And there was two of them carrying the basket down behind that. The last I saw of his body was in a ditch on the side of the road. Ed and I went, I don't know why or how we did it, we got up to a little town up there. And we managed to get up there, and we walked along, and I looked over and I seen a truck sitting in a garage. The door was open. I said, Ed, there's a truck sitting there. I said, we could get that thing, we could get out of here. He said, let's do it, Bob. I said, let's go. We went over to that truck, and I got under the steering wheel, and under my legs was a big old cylinder. I didn't know what it was. And Ed got in on the passenger side. I said, Ed, do you think that cylinder's a bomb? He said, Bob, I don't know. But it had the key in the switch. I said, well, let's find out. I reached over and turned that switch on. That sucker started. It wasn't a bomb. And I started backing that truck out. And this German man come running out of that house hollering, yeah, blah, 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 you know, all that kind of stuff. And he come running up beside the truck, and I handed him 3 American cigarettes. We had cigarettes in a red parcel sometimes. That's what he got for that truck, 3 cigarettes.
The troops that liberated you, they didn't help you get anywhere. They just kind of...
No, they were still in battle. They had to keep going. But the Germans, we got all the guns and everything from the Germans. So it was May the 2nd of 1945 at 10 o'clock in the morning, around 10 o'clock in the morning. We got the truck, and we went to Belgium. What we did, we loaded a bunch of all the prisoners could hang on. They was on that truck. And we crossed the river down. I don't know what river it was. It had a pontoon bridge. I thought we was going to sink that bridge because we had so many people on it. But we got across. But what happened, we first started out, there was a British blockade out there. They made us stop. They said, where do you think you're going? We said, we're getting the hell out of here. That's where we're going. And he said, well, you can't go like that. You don't even look like a soldier, let alone you. I said, you look like more like a bunch of dead tramps. He said, wait a minute. And they got 2 British guards, one on each side of our truck. And that's how we got to Belgium. We unloaded our prisoners, and we went back. We did that 3 times. Ed and I went back 3 times and got loaded the prisoners and brought them out. Well, we did it in about 3 days. One time we stopped at a little camp. There was a camp of American soldiers there, and there was this young lieutenant. Never will forget this man. He was going to take my truck. We had a bunch of prisoners on it. And I said, no, you're not. He said, I'll build a guardhouse on the side of this road and put you in it. I said, you build your damn guardhouse and put me in there if you want to. I got in that truck, and we started, and he left that lieutenant standing on the side of the road. And we went to Belgium. After what we went through, he's going to take my truck. There ain't no way.
Why did he want to take your truck?
Oh, he wanted to use it. They did that. We had perfect permission from our government to take any trucks, any vehicle.
Where did you end up? Where were you taken?
I don't know the name of the place, but it's a British camp, and we had body lice so bad on that. I don't know if you know what a body lice is. It was so bad that you could take your undershirt off and lay it on the ground and move by itself. You could pick those suckers off, and next day they'd be right on you again. And we got to this British camp. They made us strip everything. And wherever there was hair, they sprayed it with DDT at that time. And they took all our clothes and pitchforks and piled them up outside and burnt the clothes and gave us new outfits at that time. We looked like a soldier again. Oh, the next day we were headed to Lucky Strike in Camp Lucky Strike in France. Well, they put us in a tent, and then the next day they put Ed on the ship. I passed out again right out in the middle of the road, and I had to stay there about 30 more days before they let me go home. I weighed 180 pounds the day I got shot down, to give you an idea. The day I got liberated, I was 99 pounds. I've never gained that weight back. I weigh about 150 pounds now. And put me on the ship in 4 days. I was back in New York, Fort Dix again. Let me tell you about that. They let us all try to do a long distance, try to call home. Well, I remembered my sister's number, and I called it, but I called the wrong state. I couldn't get through. So I got on a train, and the same track that I left on, I came back on that same track here in Chattanooga. And I got in at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I got off the train. I got a taxi cab driver, and I told him where I lived down on Broad Street. And he took me down there. I said, what I owe you? He said, son, you done paid me. You don't owe me nothing. And I walked to the door and knocked on the door where I lived, where I thought I lived. Biggest big woman come to the door and she looked at me. She said, "Who are you?" And boy, I could even catch myself. I said, "Who in the hell are you?" And I could cut my tongue out with saying that, but that's what I said. She said, "You're the Honeycutt boy." I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "You go next door. They know where your family moved to, or where your mother moved to." So I did, and they told me, and I went out there. And I knocked on the door again, still dark. And my mother come to the door. And I had an older brother, 3 years older, they didn't send him overseas because he had handicap, but he was in the military. And she thought I was him. My family thought I was dead all that time because the first letter they got said I was killed in action, then I was missing in action, and all that stuff going through there. Can you imagine how she felt when she found out who I was? That's about it, honey.